It was my husband's birthday bash, and even so, he had the nerve to lock me out of the house in the middle of a thunderstorm just because I dared to kick out his mistress, who had shown up at my own home to celebrate with us. While I was shivering out in the rain, I watched through the window as they laughed, ate, and opened gifts like nothing was wrong. An hour later, a luxury black car pulled up in front of the house. I froze. It was my grandmother from down south, who I always thought was just a simple country woman, but in reality, she was a multimillionaire. Seeing me soaked to the bone, she looked at me, looked at the house, and said just 3 words: "Tear it apart." What happened next turned my husband's birthday party into the beginning of his total ruin. But before I tell you everything from the start, tell me in the comments what city or state you're watching this story from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you even more intense stories. The house was full of life that night. The massive crystal chandelier in the main foyer bathed everything in a warm light that reflected off the walls decorated with flowers and balloons. Music played in the background, just barely under the hum of conversations and the loud laughter of the guests. It was Kyrie's birthday, my husband, and I had been working non-stop since sunrise to make sure everything turned out perfect. I checked the catering, corrected the decorators, counted silverware, arranged centerpieces, and even personally ironed Kyrie's suit. My legs and back were aching. But the only thing I wanted was to see him happy and proud of his party. I thought maybe tonight he would actually remember that I was still his wife. While I was carrying a tray of drinks, I stood in a corner observing him. Kyrie was surrounded by colleagues and business partners, laughing loudly, gesturing as if he owned the world. He looked sharp in his expensive suit, the designer watch gleaming on his wrist, a glass of wine in his hand. However, there was something that pierced right through my heart. At no point did he introduce me as his wife. I moved among the guests with the tray held high like just another server. When I approached to offer him a glass of water, he barely tilted his head in thanks, without even looking me in the eyes. That man, for whom I had given everything, didn't even seem to recognize me as the lady of the house. To most of the people present, I was just part of the help. I tried to convince myself I was exaggerating, that he was simply busy attending to his important contacts. I smiled as best as I could at his partners' wives, who looked me up and down with a certain disdain when they saw my simple shoes, my modest dress, and my perfectly pressed head wrap. While they showed off designer gowns, sky-high heels, and loud jewelry, I wore the best I had, something discreet, because Kyrie never gave me much money for personal expenses. He said it was to teach me to be thrifty. Inside, my pride was burning, but I swallowed it all. I kept telling myself this was Kyrie's night and I shouldn't ruin it. Suddenly, the guests' gazes started drifting toward the entrance. The conversations died down little by little, replaced by murmurs of admiration. I turned my head and saw a woman enter who looked like she had just stepped off a red carpet. It was Vianne. She was wearing a tight, sparkling party dress that hugged every curve of her body. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in soft waves cascading over her shoulders. She walked with a confidence that filled the room, as if she knew every eye belonged to her. But what really hurt me was looking at Kyrie in that moment. As soon as he saw her, his face lit up much more than when he had seen me that same morning. Kyrie left his conversation with his partners mid-sentence and walked toward her with quick steps, smiling from ear to ear. "Vianne, what a surprise," he said with almost childish excitement. She clung to his arm, pressing her body against his, without a shred of shame in front of everyone. Nobody seemed scandalized that she was hugging a married man like that, let alone the owner of the house. I stood rooted to the spot with the tray trembling in my hands. I felt my blood run cold. As if that wasn't enough, Mama Eudora, my mother-in-law, appeared. She had always been hard on me, critical. She never had a kind word. But seeing Vianne, she transformed. She hugged her as if she were a daughter she hadn't seen in years. She showered her with kisses and smiles. "Well, look who is here," Mama Eudora exclaimed, almost singing. "You look gorgeous, baby girl. Come, I'm going to introduce you to everyone." She took Vianne by the arm and led her to the center of the living room, introducing her to the important guests. She spoke wonders of her career, her style, her supposed good family background. She treated her, right in my face, like the ideal daughter-in-law she had always wanted. I listened to those words, feeling my world crumble, bit by bit. I was Kyrie's lawful wife, the one who had taken care of Mama Eudora when she was sick, the one who cooked, cleaned, washed, and ironed, the one who stood by his side when Kyrie was still counting pennies to pay rent on a tiny room. And yet, that night in my own house, I was invisible while my husband's mistress was treated like a queen. My heart started beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. I gripped the tray so hard my knuckles turned white. I bit my lips until I almost drew blood. I tried to breathe deep, to tell myself there was an explanation, that maybe Kyrie had simply invited Vianne as a work colleague. But the way he looked at her, the way she leaned on his arm, the giggles they shared, left no room for doubt. I realized if I stayed still for one more minute, I was going to fall apart right there. So, without planning it too much, I set the tray down on a nearby table with a sharp thud that made the glass rattle, and I walked toward them with my legs slightly shaking. I planted myself in front of Kyrie and Vianne. He was leaning toward her, listening to something she was whispering in his ear, laughing as if she were the center of the universe. I looked him in the eyes, holding back tears with all my strength. "Kyrie," I said, my voice a bit cracked but firm. "What is the meaning of all this? Why is this woman here, behaving as if she were the lady of the house?" Several guests turned toward us. The silence began to spread. Kyrie wiped the smile off his face instantly and shot me a cold look. "Keziah, don't start," he muttered. "Don't make a scene at my party." Vianne let out a soft, almost mocking laugh. "I just came to celebrate the birthday of the man I love," she added in a sweet voice. "Don't be so uptight and jealous, Keziah. You're ruining the vibe." Her words went through me like a knife. The rage and humiliation mixed with the pain. I felt the blood rushing to my face. Then I pointed to the front door. "This is my house," I said loudly so everyone could hear me. "And he is my lawful husband. I am asking you to leave right now, Vianne. You are not welcome here." The room went silent. Some guests held their breath. The music was still playing, but in a second someone turned it off. The clinking of a couple of glasses stopped abruptly. Mama Eudora reacted instantly and stepped between us. "What a lack of respect!" she yelled. "How dare you kick out an important guest? Vianne has much more class than you, and she fits better in this atmosphere. You are just making a fool of yourself." Every word of hers was like a slap in the face in front of everyone. I looked at her in disbelief. "I am your daughter-in-law," I wanted to tell her. "The one who nursed you in the hospital, the one who drove you to your medical appointments." But Kyrie grabbed my wrist tightly before I could respond. His face was lit up with fury. "That's enough, Keziah," he whispered through gritted teeth, squeezing so hard he hurt me. "You are ruining my birthday. You only know how to create problems." I tried to break free. "I'm only defending my dignity as a wife," I managed to reply. He didn't want to listen. He started dragging me out of the living room in front of everyone as if I were a spoiled child. I felt the stares, the whispers, a malicious smile here and there. Nobody came to help me. Vianne and Mama Eudora watched us with an expression of triumph painted on their faces. Kyrie walked fast, and I almost tripped trying to keep up with his pace. We crossed the foyer and reached the main door. Outside, the sky was black, heavy with clouds. The distant roar of thunder and the intense drumming of rain on the pavement could be heard. Kyrie threw the door open. The cold wind and water hit our faces like a bucket of ice. "If you can't accept Vianne," he shouted over the roar of the storm, "then you have no place in this house. I want her here. If she goes, I go too." "Kyrie, please," I managed to say. He cut me off. "Take this as your choice." Without another word, he shoved me outside roughly. I lost my balance and almost fell to my knees on the flooded porch. Before I could compose myself, he slammed the door shut. A second later, I heard the metallic sound of the deadbolt turning. That combination of noises, the slam of the wood and the click of the key, sounded to me like the final closing of a chapter of my life. I stood motionless for a moment with my back to the door, feeling the rain infiltrating every seam of my clothes. My dress stuck to my body, my head wrap got soaked, and water started dripping down my neck. I was so cold my teeth were chattering. I turned around again and started pounding on the door with my fists. "Kyrie! Kyrie, open up!" I screamed with all my might. I knocked again and again, but nobody answered. The sound of the music started playing faintly from the other side, as if the party had resumed. The rain intensified. The water ran down my face, mixing with my tears, blinding me. My fingers hurt from knocking so much. Finally, I let them drop to my sides. I took a few stumbling steps and went around the house until I reached the large living room window. The glass was covered in raindrops, but I could see enough. Inside, the party had continued. Kyrie, with his hair perfectly combed and his shirt dry, was standing next to Vianne, in front of a massive multi-tiered cake. He was smiling broadly while they both held the knife together to cut the first slice. Mama Eudora was clapping beside them, proud as if she were witnessing a wedding. The guests, comfortable and well-fed, celebrated, laughed, raised their glasses, and ate the food I had ordered that very day. I rested the palm of my freezing hand on the cold glass. For a moment, I wanted to hit it with all my strength, break it, burst into the living room, and scream at them that I was the lawful wife, that house was mine too, that I was dying of cold outside while they toasted. But my strength was fading, my lips were turning purple, my legs numb. As I watched Kyrie feed Vianne the first bite of cake and how she coquettishly wiped the frosting from the corner of his lips with her finger, my mind filled with memories. I saw him just as he was before, back in the days when we lived in a tiny rented room and the rain leaked through the roof. I remembered his promises. "When I make it big, you're going to live like a queen, Keziah. Trust me." I remembered the day I sold the few pieces of jewelry my mother left me to give him capital for his first investment. I remembered the times I ate stale bread with salt while he took a proper lunch like a businessman to his meetings. I had done all that convinced that we were doing it as a couple, that we were fighting together. And now he was sharing cake with another woman in a house bought largely thanks to the sacrifices I made for love. I don't know how long I stood by the window. The rain soaked me to the soul. Every second became heavier, as if the clock had stopped. The cold wasn't just discomfort anymore. It was a deep ache in my bones. Finally, my legs stopped holding me up. I let myself fall onto the patio floor on the flooded pavement. The water rose up the hem of my dress, surrounded me, froze me. Shaking uncontrollably, I hugged my own shoulders. My breathing became jagged, as if the air had decided to abandon me. I closed my eyes, and between gasps, I prayed in silence. God, if tonight is my last night, don't let all this pain go without justice. Let them see what they have done. I felt sleep pulling me toward a dark well. Suddenly, an intense light filtered through my eyelids. It wasn't lightning. It was a steady, powerful beam approaching. I opened my eyes with difficulty. A huge black car was cutting through the rain and stopping in front of the gate. The shine of the emblem on the hood told me it was a luxury vehicle, one of those only true multimillionaires own. The engine stopped, and almost at the same time, the front door opened. A chauffeur in a dark suit and cap got out quickly, opened a massive black umbrella, and went around the car to the back door. The rain bounced off the umbrella as he opened it with a practiced motion. Then he opened the rear passenger door with a respectful gesture. First, I saw a foot with a low-heeled shoe, elegant and high quality, touching the wet ground firmly. Then appeared an older woman, back straight despite her years, wrapped in a thick coat. In one hand she carried a cane with a gold handle that shone in the porch light. Her eyes scanned the garden, the entrance, the house, until they landed on me, lying on the soaked ground. Her features hardened. She approached quickly, ignoring the puddles splashing the hem of her coat. When she reached me, I recognized her. "Grandma?" I whispered with a thread of a voice. It was my Grandma Hattie, the same one who lived in a remote little town down south, who came sometimes with bushels of rice, collard greens, and fruit, saying it was all from her garden. I had always thought she lived, like so many elderly folks, off a small patch of land. She knelt beside me without caring about the water, took my face in her warm hands, and frowned, full of worry and fury. "Keziah, my baby," she said, "what have they done to you?" She took off her coat and placed it over me, wrapping me firmly, while the chauffeur and 2 other tall men, clearly bodyguards, approached and stood a few steps back waiting for orders. My grandmother looked up toward the large illuminated window. From our position, you could clearly see Kyrie, Vianne, and Mama Eudora laughing by the cake, as if nothing bad were happening on the same property. An expression I had never seen before appeared on my grandmother's face. Her lips tightened into a tense line. Her gaze became sharp, almost cutting. She stood up with the help of her cane, and without taking her eyes off the house, murmured, but with a tone so firm it sounded like a military order, "Tear it apart!" The bodyguards nodded immediately. They didn't ask anything. They started moving toward the front door, walking with decisive steps. The chauffeur helped me get up with enormous care, as if he feared I might break, and opened the umbrella over me and my grandmother as we headed after them. The first 2 bodyguards reached the main gate. They didn't waste time ringing the doorbell or knocking politely. One stepped forward, planted his foot against the door, and delivered a dry, brutal kick. The crash resonated through the entire interior foyer. The lock gave way. The door flew wide open, hitting the wall. The cold, damp wind rushed into the living room, dragging with it the smell of rain and wet earth. But also something else, the forecast of a storm that this time would fall on those inside. In the living room, the guests froze. The music stopped. Kyrie, who was about to give Vianne another spoonful of cake, dropped the fork which clattered as it hit the floor. Vianne hid behind him, alarmed. Mama Eudora opened her eyes and mouth at the same time, unable to believe what they were seeing. Kyrie, always impulsive, was the first to react. He lunged toward the door, furious. "Who are you people?" he bellowed. "You are violating private property. This is my house. Get out before I call the police." He tried to push one of the bodyguards to get him out, but when his hand hit the man's chest, it was as if he had pushed a wall. The bodyguard didn't even move. He just swatted Kyrie's arm away with a minimal gesture, and Kyrie stumbled back, almost falling onto the buffet table. By then, all of my grandmother's men had entered and were positioning themselves at different points in the living room, forming a semicircle that isolated the entrance. The guests, with glasses still in hand, didn't know what to do. It was at that moment that my grandmother and I walked in. The sound of the cane hitting the marble accompanied her advance. Click, click, click. Me, wrapped in the coat, with my dress and head wrap dripping water, walked by her side, supported by the chauffeur. My appearance contrasted totally with the luxury of the living room. Water dripped from my clothes onto the shiny floor, leaving a trail of moisture. A murmur ran through the remaining guests. Kyrie looked at us, first confused, then indignant. Mama Eudora, trying to recover her role as the lady of the house, let out a sarcastic laugh. "Well, well," she said, "I thought they were robbers, and it turns out it's Keziah's country grandma." What a pathetic scene. Vianne relaxed a bit hearing that, and allowed herself to smile with superiority. "Came to beg for food, did you?" Mama Eudora added with contempt. "This is a private party." My grandmother didn't answer immediately. She stopped under the crystal chandelier, lifted her chin, and looked at Kyrie, Mama Eudora, and Vianne one by one. Her cold gaze made more than one guest lower their eyes. She struck the floor hard with the tip of her cane. "I haven't come to ask for anything," she said in a tone that silenced even the boldest. "I have come to take back what 3 ungrateful people should never have enjoyed." Kyrie crossed his arms. "What are you talking about?" he scoffed. "This house is mine. Keziah, get your grandma out of here. She's gone senile. If you don't leave, I'm going to have the community security drag you out. It disgusts me to see the floor stained by the water you're tracking in." One of the bodyguards took a step toward Kyrie, ready to silence him by force, but my grandmother raised her hand. She didn't say, "I'll handle it." She turned to me, adjusted my head wrap with infinite tenderness, and whispered, "Watch closely, baby. Tonight you're going to see how life returns everything they did to you." Then, without taking her eyes off Kyrie, she made a barely perceptible gesture with her head toward her head of security. That was enough. The bodyguards dispersed in silence. One approached the cake table, that tower that moments before had been the pride of the room. He placed both hands on the stand and with a single shove threw it to the floor. The giant cake smashed against the marble with a crash, spreading layers of sponge and frosting everywhere. The guests let out stifled gasps. Before they could react, another bodyguard planted himself next to the long buffet table and yanked the tablecloth hard. Plates, silver platters, salad bowls, crystal glasses, everything came crashing down. The sound of breaking glass was deafening. The food I had ordered with so much effort scattered across the floor as if it were garbage. Some female guests screamed in fear, moving away to avoid being hit by shards of glass. A third bodyguard pulled at the structure of balloons and flowers, which fell over several chairs. Another in the back kicked a huge portrait Kyrie had commissioned of himself and Vianne. The frame broke, the glass shattered. The perfect image of the happy couple ended up on the floor, trampled. The room, which minutes before had been a scene of luxury, transformed into a battlefield. Kyrie tried to push through to stop the destruction, but two bodyguards stood in his way, firm as pillars. Mama Eudora was shouting insults at my grandmother, calling her a crazy old woman and a barbarian, while she watched her expensive furniture being dragged, her ornaments broken, her centerpieces destroyed. My grandmother remained in the center, observing everything with calculated coldness. She took a phone out of her coat pocket, typed something, and seconds later the lights began to flicker. Finally, they went out completely. Only some emergency lights and the intermittent glare of lightning entering through the windows remained lit. Panic finally took hold of the guests. Nobody thought about protocols or appearances anymore. They started running toward the exit, stumbling over each other, looking for any door that would lead them out of that nightmare. Nobody had the courage to approach Kyrie to support him. In less than 10 minutes, there wasn't a single guest left in the living room. It was just my grandmother, me, the bodyguards, the doctor who had come with her, Kyrie, Vianne, and Mama Eudora. My grandmother walked to the main sofa, the one where Kyrie used to sit like the king of the place, and she sat down with all the calm in the world. She rested the cane beside her, crossed one leg over the other, and adopted a posture that made it clear who was in charge of that house now. The doctor approached me, put a dry blanket over my shoulders, had me sit down, and checked my pulse, my breathing, my temperature. He offered me a cup of hot tea. Drinking it, I felt a little bit of warmth return to my body. After having been treated worse than the help, that attention made me feel human again. My grandmother, seeing that I was stable, signaled to her assistant. He opened a leather briefcase and took out a thick, dark blue folder which he placed in her hands. My grandmother took the folder, lifted it, and let it drop onto the coffee table with a sharp slap. Kyrie's eyes followed the movement of the object. "Before you keep saying stupid things about suing and putting anyone in jail," my grandmother said, "read that." Kyrie swallowed hard. His face was still red with rage, but a shadow of fear was beginning to appear in his eyes. He took the folder with trembling hands, opened it, and started reading. At first he frowned as if he didn't understand. As he turned the pages, the color drained from his face until he was left pale as paper. Cold sweat slid down his temple. His lips moved, reading silently. Legal terms, figures, names. Vianne, beside him, tried to look over his shoulder. When she managed to see the letterhead of one of the documents, she brought her hand to her mouth, horrified. Mama Eudora, impatient, snatched a sheet from the folder to see it for herself. She read a few lines and her legs gave way. She fell sitting on the floor, powerless. The folder contained the real property title of the house, the loan contracts, and a debt acknowledgement from Kyrie's company for several $1 million. In those papers, it clearly read that the owner of the home was not Kyrie, but a corporation called Sterling Legacy Group. And the absolute owner of that group was my grandmother, Hattie Sterling. Furthermore, documents were included proving that Kyrie had siphoned money from the company to pay for the house, the cars, the parties, even trips with Vianne. The clauses were clear. Upon verification of the breach and misuse of funds, all assets acquired with that money were seized immediately. Legally, at that instant, the house ceased to be under his use. My grandmother leaned back on the sofa and spoke with a steady voice. "For years," she said, "I was the anonymous investor who sustained the company where you work. I invested in that business for one reason only, Keziah. I wanted my granddaughter to have a comfortable life. I didn't want you to know who put up the money so you wouldn't feel like less of a man. I gave you opportunities, capital, trust. And what did you do with that? You cheated on my baby. You humiliated her. You kicked her out of her own house into the rain to bring in your mistress." Kyrie shook his head. No, this can't be," he stammered. "You are an old country woman. You always come with sacks of rice. How can you be the owner of a corporate group? These papers are fake. I invite you to go to the notary tomorrow, to the public registry, to the bank that appears there," my grandmother replied. "They will tell you the same thing. And if you prefer, I'll introduce you to my lawyer, who also happened to be your boss on the board of directors." Mama Eudora, still on the floor, crawled toward the sofa. "Miss Hattie, please," she moaned. "This is all a misunderstanding. I never wanted to hurt Keziah. I just thought Vianne could help our son rise higher in life. I didn't know who you were. Please, don't take the house from us. We are family." She clung to the edge of the sofa, trying to touch my grandmother's skirt, but one of the bodyguards stepped in and moved her aside gently, but without allowing contact. The scene was pitiful. The same woman who had humiliated me hours before was now crawling, willing to say anything just to keep her comfort. Vianne, meanwhile, started backing away slowly toward a side door, clutching her purse against her body. My grandmother saw her and lifted her chin slightly. The head of security moved fast, stood in front of Vianne, and held out his hand. "The purse," he ordered. Vianne clutched it tighter. "It's mine," she replied nervously. "Who do you think you are to ask me for this?" The bodyguard snatched it from her effortlessly and dumped it upside down onto a table. Several gold rings, necklaces, and bracelets fell out, which Mama Eudora recognized instantly as hers. "Thief!" she screamed, forgetting her victim role for a second. "No wonder you liked hugging me so much." My grandmother didn't even dedicate a word to Vianne. She struck the floor with her cane. "I am not interested in your fake apologies or your tears," she said, looking at the three of them. "I am only interested in justice for my granddaughter. From this moment on, this house, the cars, the furniture, and everything you bought with company money are mine. You have 10 minutes to disappear from here without bags, without suitcases, without jewelry, only with what you are wearing." Kyrie opened his mouth to protest. "This is illegal. You can't leave us on the street. I built this house with my effort." "You built it with my money," my grandmother interrupted him. "I decide who it belongs to. 10 minutes, Kyrie, not one more. And if at the end of that time you are still here, you will leave like you put my granddaughter out. By force." She looked at her watch. The time started running. Kyrie lunged toward the stairs to go up to the master bedroom to grab something, anything, an expensive watch, money, documents. 2 bodyguards crossed into his path. "I want to go in," he pleaded. "I just need my wallet and my phone." "Madam's orders," one replied without moving. "Nobody enters any room. Everything is seized." Kyrie changed targets. He ran toward the table where the keys to his sports car were, but a bodyguard beat him to it, took them, and pocketed them. Meanwhile, Mama Eudora crawled toward me. She tried to take my hand. "Keziah, baby, you are a good woman," she cried. "Tell your grandma not to do this to us. We are your family. How are you going to allow your husband and your mother-in-law to sleep on the street?" She looked at me desperately, expecting to see the same submissive woman as always. I pulled my hand away. "A family doesn't kick their daughter out into the rain to defend a stranger," I replied with a calm voice. "A family doesn't make fun of her pain or call her an embarrassment in front of everyone. Today, you are just tasting a little bit of what you did to me." She wanted to speak, but the words got stuck in her throat. The 10 minutes ran out. My grandmother raised the cane and struck the floor. The bodyguards activated. They formed a cordon around Kyrie, Mama Eudora, and Vianne, and started pushing them toward the exit. They resisted, cried, screamed, tried to grab onto the furniture, the walls, the door frames. It was no use. They were taken to the threshold and shoved onto the porch, which was still flooded by rain. The wind whipped their faces. Their expensive clothes stuck to their bodies. The door slammed shut behind them, and the deadbolt sounded clearly. It was exactly the same sound I had heard when Kyrie kicked me out. Only now we were reversed. Me inside, dry and safe. Them outside, soaked. My grandmother turned to the house staff, who had kept apart out of fear of Kyrie and Mama Eudora. "I want you to clean all this up," she ordered, "and gather all the personal things of those three, clothes, photos, papers, memories. Whatever is worth donating gets donated. Whatever isn't gets destroyed. I don't want traces of them in this house." I looked out the window. Outside, Kyrie was pounding on the door with his fists, screaming, but his voice was lost in the roar of the storm. Mama Eudora was wailing loudly, sobbing Kyrie's name as if he were a child who had a toy taken away. Vianne was looking toward the street, calculating her next move. Inside me, there was no trace of compassion left, just a feeling of sad calm. Finally, life was teaching them what it was like to be on the other side. The rain kept falling on them without mercy. In a matter of minutes, their elegant clothes were as soaked as mine had been. Their hairstyles were ruined. Vianne's makeup melted, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. The house, which had always been lit up like a display case, turned off several exterior lights on my grandmother's order. The street in front of the mansion was left semi-dark, barely lit by distant street lamps. The guests' cars had already disappeared. None had stayed to offer help. Just like that, it was known instantly that friendships built on money and prestige disappear at the first clap of thunder. Kyrie hugged himself, jaw tight, pride wounded to the bone. He was soaked, without car keys, without a house, and with no idea what to do. Mama Eudora started complaining with her shrill voice between sobs and coughs. "This is all your fault, Kyrie," she accused him. "How did you not realize who that old woman was? How did you allow the company to depend on her? Look where you have us now, under the rain like bums." Kyrie, exhausted and overwhelmed, snapped. "Shut up, Mama," he yelled. "If you hadn't meddled in everything, if you hadn't supported bringing Vianne to the house, none of this would have happened." The argument escalated. Vianne, standing at a certain distance, looked at them with a mixture of rage and contempt. Her dress stuck to her body, her heels sinking into the mud. She didn't shed tears, only gritted her teeth. "You know what?" she exclaimed finally. "I am not going to stay here freezing with you two. I wasn't born to be poor." At that moment, a taxi drove slowly down the street. Vianne ran toward the gate, waving desperately. The taxi stopped. Kyrie tried to approach. "Vianne, wait. Let's go together. We can start from scratch somewhere else." "With you?" She let out a bitter laugh. "To do what? To live in a shack and eat scraps? No thanks. I already wasted enough time with you." She took a step toward the taxi. Kyrie, desperate, wanted to grab the door handle, but she slapped his hand away. "It's over, Kyrie. The only thing that interested me about you stayed in there." She pointed to the house. "I'm not going to carry a loser." She got into the taxi and slammed the door. The car took off and disappeared into the rain. Kyrie stood watching it vanish with his mouth half open. Then he brought his hand to his internal pocket, looking for a small wad of bills he kept for emergencies. It was empty. He understood suddenly that during the chaos of the party, while Vianne was clinging to him out of fear, she had taken the opportunity to steal the little money he had left. The night seemed to have no end. Wet and shivering, Kyrie and Mama Eudora wandered the streets looking for some roof to take shelter under. The bus stops were occupied, porches had gates, security guards kicked them out, seeing their disheveled appearance. Finally, they found a bench in a relatively quiet park. They sat there hugging each other, shaking, waiting for dawn. The bench was hard and cold. Every gust of wind soaked their bones. Mama Eudora coughed nonstop. Kyrie could barely think clearly. The memories of the house, the party, the kick at the door mixed with the noise of the rain. For the first time since he had started making money, he slept on the street. When dawn began to lighten the sky, the sun's rays hit Kyrie full in the face and forced him to open his eyes. His whole body hurt. Beside him, Mama Eudora slept curled up using her empty purse as a pillow. Her face looked dull, very different from the secure and haughty woman she had been. Kyrie woke her up carefully. "Mama, let's go. We have to do something. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. I'm going to go to the office. I'll talk to the higher-ups. Surely they don't know what that old woman has done. I'm still a director. They owe me money. We can fix it." That hope kept him standing. With the same wrinkled and damp clothes from the night before, he helped his mother up. They started walking toward the financial district where the company building was. The journey was torture. They walked under the sun that was starting to heat up with empty stomachs. People looked at them with curiosity and even disdain. Their wrinkled, dirty party clothes and their haggard faces contrasted with the impeccable suits of the office workers. Upon arriving at the lobby of the company building, Kyrie tried to regain his composure. He smoothed his hair with his hand, dusted off his jacket a bit, and pushed the glass doors with confidence. But he had barely taken a few steps when the security guards, who used to greet him with respect, blocked his path. "Mr. Kyrie, you cannot enter," said one of them. Kyrie became indignant. "What are you talking about? I am your boss. Move aside before I fire you." "Not anymore, sir," replied the guard with an uncomfortable but firm expression. "A memo arrived this morning. You are fired effective immediately. Furthermore, you are banned from entering the building. Your name is on the blacklist. I'm sorry." "I want to see that memo," demanded Kyrie. The guard, with a sigh, led him to the reception desk. There, stuck to a panel, was a sheet with the company letterhead, and at the bottom, the signature of a legal representative. The text clearly stated that Kyrie was dismissed for violating the code of ethics, for misuse of funds, and for damages to the company's reputation. It also specified that they would proceed with the seizure of all his assets to cover the losses. There was even a photo of him next to the indication, "Person not authorized to enter." Employees passing nearby stared with curiosity. Some, who used to laugh at Kyrie's jokes, now whispered behind his back discussing the scandal. He felt the floor opening under his feet. The guards escorted him to the exit. "You can't do this to me," Kyrie repeated, talking more to the company than to them. "I need to get in. I have personal things inside." "All your belongings are being reviewed by the legal department," one of the guards replied. "If there is anything considered truly personal, they will have it sent to you. For now, you have to leave." They pushed him gently toward the street, and the glass doors closed behind him. The life he had built around his office was over. Not giving up entirely, Kyrie thought of his savings account. He clearly remembered accumulating a considerable sum in his personal account. He left Mama Eudora waiting on a nearby bench and ran to the nearest bank branch. He entered, panting, asked to speak to an advisor claiming he had lost his wallet and needed to withdraw money with his ID. A kind employee attended him, took his details, entered the information into the computer, and as she read the screen, her face turned serious. "Mr. Kyrie," she said finally, "I regret to inform you that all your accounts have been frozen by court order. It says here there is a lawsuit for embezzlement of funds and that the creditors have requested the total blockage of your assets. Until the process is resolved, you cannot withdraw a single cent." "That is impossible," Kyrie stammered. "That money is mine." "I'm sorry," repeated the employee. "I can't do anything." He left the bank stumbling, his head spinning. The last hope of having some money had vanished. He returned to the park bench where his mother was waiting. She looked at him with eyes full of expectation, voice hoarse from cold and crying. "Well, did you bring money? Let's go eat." Kyrie shook his head. The words wouldn't come out. Mama Eudora brought her hands to her face and began to cry again, this time with the deep cry of someone who feels the ground disappearing. Hunger started biting at their stomachs. Kyrie checked his jacket, rummaged in a secret inner pocket where he used to keep a few reserve bills. He found nothing. He remembered then Vianne's contact at the party, how she stuck to him, how she hugged him. He understood she had also taken that money. He let out a curse, but it was of little use. Finally, with the little they had left in coins, they bought a loaf of bread to share. It was all they could afford that day. Later, desperate to get some cash, Kyrie sold his most expensive suit at a flea market. The buyer gave him a ridiculous fraction of what it was worth. Even so, that money was enough to rent a miserable little room for a week in a humid alleyway and to buy a few portions of cheap food. The room was small, with walls full of damp stains, a tin roof, an old mattress on the floor, and a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The smell of stale air mixed with the sewage outside. Mama Eudora covered her nose upon entering. "I can't live like this," she complained. "This is worse than a chicken coop." "It's what there is," replied Kyrie, exhausted. "Either this or the street. Keep your mouth shut and be grateful we at least have a roof." That first night they ate in silence, sharing a plate of rice with some cheap stew. Outside voices were heard, arguments from neighbors, someone's TV at full volume, mosquitoes buzzed in the darkness. Mama Eudora coughed more and more. Accessing doctors and medicine was now a luxury they couldn't afford. While they were falling, my life was taking a turn in the opposite direction. My grandmother took me to her main mansion, a spacious estate surrounded by green gardens far from the noise of the city center. There, for the first time in a long time, I woke up in a comfortable bed with clean and soft sheets, without having to get up early to prepare breakfasts or 1,000 special coffees for anyone. The house staff treated me with respect, calling me Ms. Kazia, offering help with laundry, with food, with everything. But my grandmother didn't want me to stay in the position of a protected child. "Money without character will make you vulnerable," she told me. "You are going to learn how to handle what is yours. And if anyone tries to step on you again, they won't have anywhere to attack." Thus began my true transformation. Every day my grandmother sat with me in her office. She explained how the Sterling Legacy Group worked, the real estate projects, the investments, the alliances. She taught me to read financial statements, to understand contracts, to identify risks. At first I felt intimidated. I had spent years between the kitchen and the laundry room, but soon I understood that deep down I had always had the capacity to organize, to foresee, to manage. Only nobody had given me the opportunity. My grandmother insisted firmly, but always from a place of love. "I don't want the next Kyrie that appears in your life to tell you that you aren't worth anything. I want him to know that if he loses you, he loses everything." My exterior appearance started to reflect my interior change. I left behind the worn-out clothes I had used for so many years and started dressing in elegant and understated outfits in line with my faith and my new role. My head wraps became part of a curated style, not a sad obligation. Soft makeup returned color to my face. When I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me, instead of the scared and always apologizing wife, I saw someone who finally knew her worth. The day I entered the Sterling Legacy Group building as the future CEO, the employees stood up spontaneously upon seeing me. I walked to the front of the boardroom and presided over my first meeting. There were nerves, yes, but also a certainty. I didn't have to ask any man for permission to be there. The news didn't take long to reach the media. They spoke of me as the hidden heiress, the new face of the Sterling Group. One afternoon, Kyrie, now turned into a loader at the market, took refuge in a small coffee stand to dodge the rain. He sat on a plastic chair with his back aching from the weight of the boxes he had carried. Above his head, an old television was broadcasting the news. Looking up, he saw my image on the screen. I was sitting in a TV studio answering questions about new housing projects and the company's social programs. My voice sounded secure. My eyes shone. Kyrie stood transfixed, watching. It took him a few seconds to accept it was me. I looked like another person. He felt a knot in his throat. For the first time, regret pierced him beyond the issue of money. He understood he had thrown something infinitely valuable into the mud. Immediately, his mind started looking for ways out. Keziah has always been good, he told himself. She always forgave me. Maybe if I beg her forgiveness on my knees, she will accept me again. She has a big heart. We could start over. The next day, he decided to play his last card. He used the little he had to pay for transport to the financial district and planted himself in front of the Sterling Legacy Group skyscraper. He entered the lobby that looked like marble and glass with his heart pounding in his chest. He approached the reception desk. "I want to see Ms. Keziah," he said, trying to sound confident. "I am her husband." The receptionist scanned him with her gaze. The worn clothes, the stubble of several days, the smell of sweat and the market. Feigning professional calm, she discreetly pressed a button to call security. Through the intercom, she said, "There is a disturbed man claiming to be the director's husband. He seems not to be in his right mind." Kyrie raised his voice. "Tell her to come down. Tell her Kyrie is here. She knows me. I'm her husband." Some employees passing by turned to see what was happening. Stifled giggles were heard. 3 security guards, different from those at his old company but just as firm, approached. "You have to leave, sir," said one. "I am not going to move until I see her," insisted Kyrie. "Tell her I am here." The guards didn't argue. Each grabbed him by an arm and led him toward the exit while he tried to break free, shouting my name. They removed him to the sidewalk and released him there in front of the building. At that moment, a luxury car stopped in front of the main entrance. A chauffeur opened the back door. I got out of the car with my work folder in hand, followed by my assistant. Kyrie, upon seeing me, felt an electric shock. "Keziah!" he screamed. "Keziah, it's me!" He tried to run toward me, but the guards blocked him before he got too close. I heard my name in the distance, and by reflex turned my head. Our eyes met for an instant. In his, I saw desperation, fear, nostalgia. In mine, there was no longer love nor hate, only an immense distance. I tilted my head barely, as if acknowledging the existence of an old acquaintance, and then turned toward the glass door. I entered the building, and the automatic system closed the entrance behind me, separating our paths permanently. Kyrie remained on the sidewalk with his hands hanging at his sides while people walked around him without paying attention. Time marched on. In the little room in the alleyways, the air became heavier and heavier. The dampness worsened. Mold took over the walls. Mama Eudora weakened day by day. The cough became more violent and frequent. The prescribed medication cost more than they could pay. Kyrie, sitting by the half-open door, counted the few coins left in his palm. He knew they weren't enough for the month's rent. The landlord had already started pressuring them. He thought about the past, the expensive restaurants, the bottles of wine he opened just to show off, the bills he threw away on stupid bets. Every memory weighed on him like a stone. One afternoon, a strange silence fell over the alley. The children stopped screaming. The neighbor's TV turned off. The engine of an expensive car approaching was heard. It wasn't normal for a luxury black sedan to enter that maze of low houses and exposed wires. Neighbors came out to their doors murmuring. The car stopped right in front of the room where Kyrie and Mama Eudora lived. The chauffeur got out, opened the back door, and from it, I descended with 2 bodyguards. I was wearing an elegant suit. My head wrap was impeccable. My shoes didn't have a single stain. My presence clashed with the surroundings, but I maintained a firm countenance. Kyrie, who was in the doorway, saw me and stood up abruptly. "Keziah," he whispered, disbelieving what he saw. Mama Eudora, hearing my name, crawled to the threshold. "Baby, I knew you were going to come," she cried. "I knew you weren't going to abandon us. Surely you've come to take us home, right?" I raised my gaze toward them. I didn't get any closer. I stayed at a prudent distance with my bodyguards, forming an almost invisible barrier around me. My assistant approached Kyrie and extended a large manila envelope to him. Kyrie took it with trembling hands, full of hope. He thought he would find money inside. He opened it and took out several documents. His eyes scanned the first page from top to bottom. His heart plummeted. They were divorce papers. Listed, there were all his faults: infidelity, psychological abuse, abandonment, and the night he kicked me out into the rain. I spoke up. "I want you to sign them," I said with a firm voice, but without shouting. "I don't want this process to drag on. I need to close this chapter. I don't want to remain linked to you, not even on paper." Mama Eudora started sobbing loudly. "Don't do it, daughter," she pleaded. "Don't destroy your family. I promise I'm going to be a good mother-in-law. I made a mistake, but we all make mistakes. I beg you, don't leave us like this." I looked at her for an instant. "Family didn't defend me when I needed it," I replied. "When I was outside the house soaking wet, you were inside clapping for your son's mistress. That is not family." Then I took out a smaller white envelope and placed it on an old chair on the porch. "There is some money in there," I added. "It is not compensation or alimony or anything like that. It is charity. I give it because I have an obligation to help the poor. Use it for medicine and food for a few days. After that, there will be no more. To me, you two are now just two strangers I once knew." Without waiting for an answer, I turned around and returned to the car. Mama Eudora's sobs and Kyrie's stifled protests remained behind. My bodyguards closed the door. The car took off. The divorce moved fast. The day of the court hearing, the sky was overcast. Kyrie attended with a borrowed shirt, without a lawyer to represent him. I arrived with my legal team. The judge heard the evidence, which was overwhelming. The sentence was clear. The marriage was dissolved. I kept all my assets, and he had no right to claim anything. Upon leaving the courthouse, Kyrie tried to run toward me one more time, but my bodyguards blocked his path. I got in the car, they closed the door, and we left. Not another word was needed. When Kyrie arrived back at the alleyway where the rented room was, he found the few belongings of his and his mother piled outside. The landlord had decided to kick them out for lack of payment. The month was about to start again, and he didn't want problems. Mama Eudora was sitting on the sidewalk hugging a bundle of old clothes. The sky opened up in rain again. They had nowhere to go. They sought shelter under the overhang of a closed shop. They sat on the floor, surrounded by plastic bags, looking at the wet street. It was like reliving the night they had kicked me out, only this time there was no warm house on the other side of the door. Mama Eudora murmured my name between broken prayers, asking for forgiveness and begging for a miracle. But miracles didn't arrive. The rain was falling hard when a luxury black car passed slowly down the nearby avenue, trapped in traffic. It was my grandmother's Rolls-Royce. Kyrie recognized it immediately. Through the glass, fogged up but illuminated by the streetlights, he could see the interior. There was my grandmother sitting next to me. The atmosphere was warm, the lights soft. I was holding a steaming cup of tea between my hands. I was laughing at something she had just said. My face was peaceful, my eyes full of life. My grandmother looked at me with pride and from time to time took my hand with an affectionate gesture. Kyrie watched them with his clothes stuck to his body, hair dripping, fingers numb. He felt something inside him break permanently. The traffic started moving again. The Rolls-Royce moved slowly and then accelerated, disappearing into the curtain of water. Inside the car, I didn't look to the sides. I didn't see Kyrie or Mama Eudora huddled next to the closed shop. For me, that story was already closed. I looked forward, toward the road life offered me now, accompanied by my grandmother's love and backed by my own effort. Outside, on the wet sidewalk, Kyrie let himself fall onto his knees. He covered his face with both hands and broke down crying, not just from the cold, not just from hunger, but from the certainty that nothing he had lost could be recovered. Mama Eudora, beside him, was too exhausted to keep crying. She just stared at nothing with empty eyes. That single phrase my grandmother pronounced in front of the mansion, "Tear it apart," had been fulfilled in a way nobody in that house could have imagined. Not only had a party, a cake, or some expensive furniture been destroyed, an entire life built on betrayal and abuse had been demolished. The house, the money, the prestige, the mistress, the fake friendships. Everything vanished. And in the middle of that rubble emerged something new. A woman who learned not to let anyone throw her out into the rain again. Meanwhile, for Kyrie, the worst sentence wasn't poverty, but having to live knowing that the woman he humiliated lived better without him than with him, and that punishment, unlike the storm, would have no end. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.